Welcome back to the Social Selling Podcast, where I'm going to share one of the most common questions and, in essence, objections I get from sales teams, even from leaders out there, which is, what if my customers aren't on LinkedIn? Now, here I am, Mr. LinkedIn, Mr. Social Selling, very passionate about the opportunity that sits within this amazing platform. But what if my customers aren't on LinkedIn? Should I use it? Should I not use it? How much time should I spend using it? Where else are they? How can I find them? It's a very valid question. And there are a few different angles which we're going to discuss in this podcast episode around what you can do if your customers, or maybe a particular customer, isn't on LinkedIn or isn't very active on LinkedIn. What are the different things you can do to still leverage LinkedIn? And look, I will be always completely honest. If lots of your customers aren't on LinkedIn, then I don't want you to waste time somewhere that's not going to deliver an ROI. I am all about the return on investment. So if I'm going to suggest to you to use LinkedIn, it's because there is an outcome to be had. If I can't see it as much as you can't see it, then I will always guide you to somewhere that will have it. So let's go straight in with the easy one, which is, let's say, for example, and I'll show you how you can find how active your customers are and how many of your customers are on LinkedIn. But let's just say, for argument's sake, the majority, or maybe there are some rare cases that all of your customers aren't on LinkedIn, then it's fine. Pick up the phone and call them. Write them emails. Go to networking events. Find wherever they are and go there. If they're not going to be active on LinkedIn, then maybe it's not the place to go. But let's just peel back the layers a little bit, because maybe that's the wrong assumption to make. So I'm going to use some examples, and these are going to be completely made up for the sake of demonstration. But let's say you're selling to, let's use CFOs as an example, chief financial officers. Let's say you're selling to CFOs in the pharmaceutical industry. Now, there is probably a large percentage of CFOs in pharmaceutical industry that probably aren't very active on LinkedIn. Let's be completely fair. But does that mean you shouldn't use LinkedIn? No, it absolutely doesn't. And let's peel back why. Number one, they might not be active, but it doesn't mean they're not present. And just because they're not active, it doesn't mean they're not being influenced or they're not consuming or being impacted by activity on LinkedIn. So just because they're not active, it doesn't mean it's not worth utilizing. There are lots of decision makers, especially senior decision makers, that probably aren't posting content or doing a ton of engagement, like liking and commenting, but they are consuming. I've met CEOs that spend hours scrolling through LinkedIn. They don't post anything themselves. They might send a message here and there. They're not very active, but they're still being impacted heavily. And actually, it's impacting who they buy from, what they buy, etc. So if they're on LinkedIn and there is some level, you can see they've got a network of a certain size, over a few hundred connections. Maybe every now and then they'll click a like on something. There is still some opportunity there. But let's say even still, the majority of the decision makers you're trying to reach just aren't very active on LinkedIn. Before we jump ship and abandon LinkedIn, let's just look if their team are active on LinkedIn. So if the CFO isn't very active, well, what is the reality that they're going to be the only person you speak to and the only person involved in that buying decision? It's pretty low. So what about their team? What about the rest of the finance or the accounting team? Are they active on LinkedIn? Which you're probably going to find a lot more of them are active. And actually, those are going to be better doors to go in to then reach up to the CFO. So actually using LinkedIn is actually even better of a strategy than just going for the CFO. So maybe there are other doors to use that are going to be a lot more active and engaged and more likely to convert, that you're able to then go through to get through to the CFO, who are definitely going to be active on LinkedIn. So look at their team. Equally, look at other decision makers in the company. Yes, the CFO might be the final person to sign, but the CEO is probably going to have some involvement, and maybe other departments, depending on the product or service you sell, are also going to be involved. So look at other departments that, again, might be more active. Maybe the CFO is your end goal, but maybe there are other people you can go in through. And I'm gonna share a story. Let me bring this to life in the best possible way. Years ago, I was selling in the IT tech industry, and I was selling to IT tech directors, CTOs, those sort of things. And there was one company I was trying to sell to the CTO for. It was quite a large company, multi-million-pound company. I could not get through to the CTO, and I was trying all the tricks on LinkedIn. I was cold calling, I was cold emailing, I was looking for introductions, could not get through to the CTO at all. Now, by chance, this was one of the early days where I started to share content on LinkedIn, and I was sharing content for salespeople because that was the role I was doing and what I was experienced in. One week, I shared a blog, LinkedIn article with some sales tips, and a salesperson at that company where I was trying to get to the CTO, a salesperson, all they did was they liked my post. But I went through, I do every post I do, I check all the likes and comments, and I saw them and I was like, light bulb moment, salesperson at this company I'm trying to prospect has liked my post. So I sent them a message and I just said, hey, thanks for liking my post. What was your favorite part? And we had a conversation and we went back and forth, maybe 5 or 6 messages talking about that particular blog and their experience. But I built enough rapport where I was then able to go to them and say, do you know what's funny? Actually, I've been trying to reach your CTO for months now, tried lots of different ways. I really think we can help them with X, Y, and Z. I don't suppose there's anything you might be able to help with. Now, because they'd got value from the blog and because they'd got value and I'd warmed up, I didn't just go straight in with that from the get-go. They were more than happy to do so. And they made that introduction. They set up a phone call, which I was then able to turn into an opportunity and eventually a sale. But as the CTO, they were not responding on LinkedIn, and there were lots of CTOs that definitely weren't very active on LinkedIn. Did it mean that I should not use LinkedIn? Absolutely not. In fact, using LinkedIn more helps me create other opportunities that got my foot in the door to then create that opportunity. So I guess ultimately we want to open our eyes and look at the bigger picture. Yes, your target decision maker might not be the most active. It doesn't mean there aren't different routes. As a salesperson, we might see a wall. We're not looking at that wall thinking, well, can't do anything now, better turn back and go back. We're looking at how can I get over that wall, around that wall, through that wall. That's what sales is about. And LinkedIn is exactly the same. We want to look for different opportunities. And as I said, LinkedIn is full of multiple. So whether it's people lower down, people in different departments, there'll be lots of different ways you can look at it. Another way to frame this is to look at other areas they might be more active. So separating that they may still be influenced by LinkedIn and it's probably still valuable to be active in some capacity on LinkedIn, is definitely worth looking at where else they're going to be. Are they at events, physical or virtual? Are they more active on other social networks? Using the CTOs as an example, the chief technology officers or IT leaders where I've sold in for years before, they were definitely back then a lot more active on what was back then Twitter and is X now. So there may be other social networks that your target customers are more active on, and so it may be worth looking at how they're using it. Now, quick disclaimer, you might find some of your prospects are more active on Facebook and Instagram, but if they're more active because they're using it for personal reasons, probably doesn't make it a good sales opportunities. I can't count the CEOs and C-level execs that I've spoken to that have hated it when salespeople have contacted them on Facebook and Instagram, which they only use for personal reasons. It's very easy to see when someone is using it for those reasons. I would probably say that's a no-go area. You could do some research, but don't be creepy with that research. Look for professional insights, not personal. Don't go on Facebook, see something, come onto LinkedIn and be like, oh, hey, I saw you were out with your family last week. Probably not going to go down too well. But if you can see that they're sharing something professional and it's relevant, great, then you can utilize it. But look at other social networks that they might be using, and equally other places they might be going. Webinars, events, podcast episodes. Try and see where they're most active. But as I said, if your target customer, isn't very active, there are still lots of other ways to look at it. And equally, do a test, and you can do this on a monthly or quarterly basis, but maybe take a pick of 10 to 20 prospects and 10 to 20 customers that you're already working with, and look at how active they are on LinkedIn. Look at what percentage is active, not active, which percentage is posting content, what percentage isn't posting content. And equally, you can then dig a bit deeper. Okay, so maybe we find that only 5% of our target customers are active on LinkedIn, but actually 75% of their teams are active. And that's the better strategy. And that should then change your strategy. So instead of posting content for again, we'll go back to the CFO example. If you find that the majority of your target decision makers, if they were CFOs, weren't active on LinkedIn, but their teams were, then your content changes from being for CFOs to being for maybe, head of finance or whichever department or role is more active. So your content strategy, your social selling strategy becomes focused at them because there is a much greater chance that door is going to be easy to get into where you can then sell up to the CFO or whichever higher decision maker you're selling into. So yes, your target customer may not be the most active on LinkedIn, but trust me, there are so many different other angles and ways you can leverage LinkedIn to reach them, engage them, create conversations either with people in other departments or lower down that might help you eventually get to that key decision maker in the long run. So don't be too put off. Don't see it as a wall and give up and turn back. There may be lots of different ways you can still leverage LinkedIn to engage your target customers. With that, that's this episode done. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.